Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming and Operation Buckthorn. That's right, our first episode of Godlike. I have been running Godlike for members of my Patreon, as I made clear in my very recent video on the very same subject, and this is my first recap video covering that campaign. Now, first things first, let's cover off who our player characters are. Firstly, we have Bastien Morel, a member of the French Resistance, whose codename is Aurora. Bastien was there when the Nazis occupied Paris. Having said that word in the first minute of my video may well get me demonetized, but it's very difficult to avoid calling them what they are in a game about Second World War RPGs. Anyway. Bastien was there in France at the time. He was just a French farmer, but crucially a French Jewish farmer. His entire village was wiped out while he was picking truffles with his pig. And when he made it back, everyone was, well, I doubt they were even being placed in a mass grave. The bodies were just being laid out there. One child survived, and Bastien was able to extract that kid from France. Both of them were Jewish, and they fled to Britain. They worked with Free French government to the ability, well, Bastien did, to the ability that he could. And his talent manifested while he was trying to protect this kid and stay undetected in occupied France. Bastien's ability is one of illusion. He can make illusions appear before the eyes. He can basically get into the minds of his targets and make them see things that aren't there. What's more, our player of Bastien decided to have this affect mass people, so it's a mass hallucination ability, which is very fun. Now, this character has a sort of Inglourious Bastards theme, of course, being a French Jew and wanting to essentially wipe out as many of these Nazi bastards as possible. And as I mentioned in my previous video, I think that's something we can all get on board with. Our next character is Persephone Katsaros, a member of the Greek Resistance, codenamed Shadow. And Persephone's ability is a very simple one. Hard invisibility. So what's hard invisibility? Well, invisibility on its own is the ability to disappear, but doesn't necessarily grant you the ability of sight, the ability to necessarily remain substantial. There's lots of tweaks and features that occur with invisibility in this game, but hard invisibility has allowed her to basically put hard dice in this power, which means she has 10, 10, 10 whenever she uses it. She will always be invisible for 3 minutes at a go. 3 minutes. She was a Greek resistance fighter, or was at school for psychiatry and a teacher's assistant at the same time. She was assisting the resistance by passing on information while at the university. Her talent manifested when Professor Anastasios was being interrogated by the Gestapo. She was about to visit his office, saw them there, they saw her, she disappeared while running from them. It turns out the Gestapo were aware of this funnel of information passing through the University of Athens. So Persephone is still in Greece, while Bastien starts the game in Britain. Then we have Emilios, or Emil Zacharias, a member of the Greek Liberation Army, so a communist. His codename is Rabbit. He is a saboteur, a Greek national on the communist side of the resistance. For history buffs out there, you will know that much as in Yugoslavia, there were lots of divisions within the Greek resistance movement on political lines. There were Greek national resistance, there was Greek communist resistance, there were non-affiliated partisans, there were resistance that were being deployed and employed by the Allies. It was a thoroughly uncoordinated resistance movement, in fact, multiple resistance movements, and that is how things occur in war, sadly. Emilios, unlike Persephone, or Shadow, I should say, unlike Shadow, Rabbit worked violently against the Nazis. Shadow was a secret funnel of information, as I say. Continued to be so after she developed her talent. Rabbit was a saboteur. Guerrilla warfare was very much his thing. He blew up a railway bridge rather famously, to the extent that the Germans have essentially marked him for death. His talent manifested when the Nazis started launching reprisals against Greek civilians. Famously or infamously, the Nazis in real life went about massacring hundreds of people if they suspected or ever found evidence that one person in a village was a member of the resistance. They would wipe out the entire village of men, women, and children. And I know that this information is grotesque, it is horrible, it is also true, and we should never try to dance around the fact that these people were absolutely monstrous and did terrible things to totally innocent people. Now, next up, so Rabbit is... Oh, I didn't talk about Rabbit's talent in this game. Well, Rabbit's ability is a sidekick ability. So a sidekick is essentially a phantom creature or person or monster or animal. In this case, it is a rabbit. Now, regular humans cannot see it. Mortal humans, non-talents, cannot perceive it. But they can certainly feel it. Because this rabbit is capable of lifting 2 tons. It is capable of basically barreling through a wall and ripping people apart. Yes, there is a Monty Python reference there, an inference even, but it's a lot of fun. To any talent, they would be able to see this rabbit very comfortably in the hands of Emil, but when that rabbit goes, explosions follow. One of the most fun and also complex talents we have in the game in terms of its build. Now, next we have John Miller. You couldn't get a more average Joe American name than this. He was employed in American PsyOps. His codename is Salesman. Now, Salesman is a hyper-command talent. Rather than the other talents who have really put their abilities into miracles, essentially special powers, hyper-command is putting lots and lots of points in an attribute to a degree that most humans cannot manage. He has like 9 dice in command. But he kept that ability, or keeps it, subtle. Went to Penn State. He had a twin brother, Mark Miller, who did a degree in history, while John was studying psychology. Well, Mark was one of the first enlisted, and he was killed. Killed in 1943, and by this point, John's talent had already manifested, but he didn't let anyone know about it. His power appeared on December 25th, 1942, and his brother died in 1943, and that is what, or we should say, went MIA. His body has not been recovered. And so John signed up as well. At this time, he is a second lieutenant, or lieutenant, you would say. The only member of this crew who has a military rank. So we started our campaign with Aurora and Salesman in a hangar in England, where they and various other talents were being addressed by some sergeant major, or no, in fact it was a brigadier, who was taking them through the operation that they were about to be deployed on. That they were not allowed to tell anybody about this, that they would be moving straight from the hangar to the plane. They have already said whatever goodbyes they will. From here on out, they will be behind enemy lines. If this is not an operation for them, it is time for them to leave. Naturally, they remain seated. They were told from here that they would be dropped into Greece, Nazi-occupied Greece, where they would be communicating, meeting up with, connecting to the Greek resistance, and they would be targeting a weak spot in the SS hierarchy in Greece. Their objective was to meet these resistance, abduct this SS officer, find out some very valuable and intimate information that he has that nobody else knows, and then get it back to the Allies in the West to enable the invasion of Europe via its soft underbelly in Greece. Now, as I mentioned in my previous Godlike video, we all know that isn't how the Second World War went. Our characters don't know that this isn't how the Second World War goes. And who knows? Who knows? Just because it feels like it's one of those missions that's doomed to fail doesn't mean it can't go Inglourious Bastards. Doesn't mean that time and situations may not change. Maybe this is a decoy mission to take eyes off of Normandy, because this is February 1944. But who knows? If they are incredibly successful, maybe time itself will change. So, our characters get to know each other to a limited degree, but they are speaking by codename, Reservoir Dogs style, to stay in that Tarantino mold. Meanwhile, also Inglourious Basterds style, Rabbit and Shadow are meeting with a resistance contact in a tavern, a cellar pub, so you know the scene, with one of their members of the resistance to be told where they're to be deployed, who they're to meet with, and when these British and French, these Allied airmen, are supposed to be dropping into Greece. They get the location. It's a monastery in Kefalonia. They make their way there. They're told that these people are going to be dropping in on the following night, and they need to make ready for them. This west coast of Kefalonia is largely unoccupied. There is this great monastery here, but there is no huge presence of Nazis in the monastery of Kipurian, all the way over on the west coast. And so the resistance are to be waiting in the field for these men to drop in, at which point they will regroup, they will make their way to mainland Greece, and then they will find their way to Athens. There is a monk in the monastery who is also a member of the resistance, who knows a little about their target, and essentially how to grab him, how to snatch him, and what to extract from him. Here's where things go wrong. Unfortunately, this being a war, timings don't always work out. Indeed, it seems the date is wrong. The resistance are expecting the airmen to drop in tomorrow night. They drop in tonight, while our Greek resistance characters are still on their way to the monastery. This starts with John Miller, salesman, unfortunately failing his parachute roll. Now, I'm not so much of a bastard GM that I kill you immediately for that, although I've certainly played games where hang gliding has had bad effects. In this case, John, rather than landing on mainland Kefalonia, lands in the sea to the west, tangled in his parachute. He even fails on his swimming. What he does succeed on is using his hyper command to get into the ears of one of his fellow talents who's also landed in the sea, swims over, rescues him, drags him to shore. He introduces himself as Buster. He's one of the group who was in the hangar. He is a corporal, salesman is a lieutenant. While they've agreed that this isn't strictly a military operation in the ordinary sense, they're not going to refer to each other by rank, that very swiftly falls away, and Buster starts referring to salesman as lieutenant. Buster is a Canadian, and he demonstrates his ability as he disintegrates the parachute that our good salesman was tangled up in, explaining that his job here is to remove evidence of the squad's activities. As he says that, this rather taut Canadian with somewhat sunken eyes, prominent cheekbones, a rather skull-like face, salesman gets the impression that removal of evidence may extend to more than just fabric and string. They decide that, having landed off course, they've got to head inland and see if they can find any of their fellow talents who have landed here and hereabouts. And so they head up the beach and scale the cliff onto the mainland. I say the mainland, onto the main body of Kefalonia. Meanwhile, our resistance members have made it to the monastery, and to their surprise, rather than meeting a monk nearby, they find a man in infantry uniform, olive drab, who points a rifle at them. There is a set to. I was very much certain that as a GM I thought this is going to go very badly, because immediately Rabbit deployed his Phantom Rabbit, his sidekick, thankfully didn't go off. This was a failed dice roll, and Shadow, rather than getting involved in a fight, just disappeared, leaving Rabbit having a rifle pointed at him from this infantryman. Thankfully, a successful language roll indicated that this man was speaking Greek with a very English tone. That is, Greek was not his native language. He wasn't a German soldier trying to speak Greek. And then Shadow put a gun, after deploying her invisibility very well, to the man's head, say, drop the rifle. He did so. They discovered that this person, codename Alert, is a private as part of the talent group that's being dropped into Kefalonia. He made it clear to them, no, we're being dropped in tonight. I don't know where the rest of my squad is, but I'm here. I'm here to meet up with you if you're members of the Resistance. So there was a bit of confusion, but ultimately they got through it without any bloodshed. He also explained why he was in uniform, that there were rumours that people being dropped into Europe outside of uniform were being treated as spies and summarily executed. If you land in uniform and are immediately captured, then you are immediately taken as a prisoner of war. And so, currently, all of our people are in uniform. Whether it remains that way, we shall see. They enter the monastery where they try and find their friendly monk, who, unbeknownst to them, Brother Giorgio. Unfortunately, the first person they approach is not the right monk, because there are always breakdowns in intelligence and communications. Brother Stelios, the wrong monk, a man with a long tangled beard and hair, Rasputin-like. Remember, these are Greek Orthodox, these are not monks with tonsured hair, perfectly clean-shaven and so on. And Brother Stelios, Rabbit immediately got the impression he's the kind of person that's going to tell others that he saw this man in infantry uniform, that the Resistance have been active here, but they decided to leave it to Brother Giorgio, who they then met up with, to deal with that situation, to convince his fellow monk not to go spreading word around that the Resistance are using the monastery, because after all, if that happens, everyone in the monastery will probably pay the price. But they're leaving it to an NPC to resolve that situation, so we'll have to see how that goes. So, having stolen a truck and recovered Alert, our private, the characters from that point decide... his ability is Alert, his codename is Nightmare. My mistake. So the Alert power allows him to sense danger, sense ambushes, sense that combat is about to break out and so on, and give significant forewarning. It is not necessarily the most useful ability. It is a spidey sense of sorts, but it can most definitely help. It's not the most explosive, but it is definitely helpful. So, they discover from Brother Giorgio that their target is Obersturmbannführer Otto Lerner. He is a member of the SS, and during every Sunday service, when some of his soldiers attend church, or they meet with their own chaplain, he visits a brothel come pub called La Taverna. So every Sunday morning, he is there for about 2 to 3 hours, and he goes there without any guard or any supervision. Everyone else is otherwise occupied. This is a high-ranking member of the SS, probably the highest member of the SS in Athens. And most significantly, he knows where the Nazis are weakest in Greece. So it's the talent's job to snatch him up, to interrogate him, and for them to devise how he's not going to be missed. Here is the problem. If he is not returned within those 3 hours, people are going to start looking for him. And if they realise he's dead or disappeared, the Germans will start changing their tactics, and they will get the Greek nationalists who are on their side to change their tactics as well. And if anything, it will just clamp up the efforts over there. So they need to think very carefully how they're going to deal with this man. Meanwhile, Salesman and Buster have made their way onto the shore. They've been scouting around, keeping their heads low. The sun is rising, and they haven't met any members of the resistance yet. Indeed, what they ultimately find as they're looking around is another one of their talents up a tree. His parachute got caught in a tree. They are able to ease him down. This is a large, heavy-set man, a simple English farmer who developed a talent for heavy armor. His codename is Wattle. They managed to get him down from the trees without injury. And I will say again, as a GM, that was not a guarantee. This entire scenario is set up, or this opening of the scenario is set up to see how many of the talents can actually make it through the initial landings. So you'll see one who doesn't very shortly. Wattle is not a soldier, but he has heavy armor. In other words, he is bulletproof. So in a pinch, he can, in theory, take a few blows. The abilities of Buster come to the fair again, and he disintegrates the parachute and all evidence of their arrival. They're looking around trying to find other members of the resistance, and instead what they find a rag and bone man who is using the early hours of the morning to scour the shore. They avoid him for pieces of scrap metal that might wash in. There's a lot of scrap metal in the Mediterranean and elsewhere right now, given the whole war thing going on. But what they do find is a downed airman in a field, wrapped in his parachute. Has landed on him. He has a broken leg. He has a broken arm. His face is bloody. His ribs could be broken. He's unconscious. This man, they know immediately, was their Greek. This is codename Midas. They encountered him in the hangar before. He was very enthusiastic about this mission. Right now, he is in far too battered and broken a state to go on. No one here has any kind of healing talents. That is not how this crew so far, anyway, has been built. And they're wondering what they should do with him. As this is going on, Buster is scouring the beach to see if he can find any more of their fellow talents. He finds a parachute there that is wrapped around a rock. He destroys the parachute, but it seems that the soldier has been disconnected from it. It's around this time that, using the rabbit Cottontail, Rabbit's phantom sidekick, Cottontail, who is telepathically linked to Rabbit, spots our other player characters in the field and hops over to them. They bring the truck over. There's another set too. Is there going to be shots fired? But ultimately, they defuse the situation. They introduce each other. Now our party is more or less together. But they have a problem. Even though Shadow tries her best to treat Midas, who is still unconscious, there's only so much she can do with basic first aid. He needs to be in a hospital. His lungs could be punctured. Buster has returned by this point and offers to see what he can do. The lieutenant, salesman, gives permission. He climbs into the truck bed and proceeds to disintegrate Midas. And he reminds them, there can't be any evidence of our having been here. I'm under specific instructions to ensure that there is no trail left of our activities here in Greece. And around that time, our session ended. It very much puts to mind the stakes at play in the Second World War. So we will have to see what happens next. We will have to see. They decide that they weren't going to put Midas in the monastery because it could draw negative attention to the monastery from the Nazis. They weren't going to drop him off at hospital. They weren't going to leave him in a field. Buster took the decision. He destroyed them. Destroyed the evidence, I should say. But with it, killed a man. So we will see what happens next in our next episode of Operation Buckthorn, as our characters have to make their way from Kefalonia to Greece. They've decided that they are not going to look around for more of their 9-man crew. It was 9 talents who were dropped from that plane. So far, we have Salesman, we have Buster, we have Nightmare, and we have Wattle. We have a dead or disintegrated Midas. That still leaves 4 others. Where are they? Where is Aurora? one of our other player characters? We don't know yet. We do not know. We shall find out. We'll find out next time. Thank you very much for watching, and if you want to play in this game of Godlike, please do sign up using the video description link below. Till next time.